Okay. Okay, we're going. We're live. Hey, thanks for joining us for presentation on Tofino. Thanks for everyone joining us YouTube live. I think Doug is checking the feed to see if there's any questions, and so if you have questions, he might respond. He might not. So, but if you are online, thanks for joining us. But you're not here, and they're drinking beer, so you're missing out. And but that's okay. So. Super excited to talk about Tofino. I've been up there a bunch of different times. I think my first trip, can't remember. It was either 9 or 10 years ago, and I got introduced to it. And then we started hosting trips up there, and we would do a trip every summer. And then we started to do 2 trips back to back every summer. And it's just a really awesome place. It kind of makes you think about. What maybe fishing was like in Puget Sound like 150 years ago or something. I don't know. There's just so much in the water. Like throwing your hook in the water just gets bit like all the time. So fun. It'll be fun to talk through some of that today and show off some photos. I put together a slideshow from this last summer, some different photos and videos, and then. But then I also have a couple photos that I just like a couple nights ago scrolled through like the old hard drive and pulled out some stuff, just like some really fun memories. And so it was really fun to like put this together because it got me totally jazzed. I'm like, dang, I gotta wait 8 months to go back, but I'm really excited about it. So this summer we're doing 2 trips. We have a trip in August, the 6th and the 10th, and that's staying at the Tofino Resort and Marina, this is it here, and we fish on we fish on these 17-foot skiffs, and then the second trip is something that we haven't done before, and I'm really excited about this. We are doing a kayak fishing trip. We've hired a landing craft, one of those ships that has like the front like drops down, so. We're gonna load that thing up with kayaks and camping gear, and we're getting carried off to one of the outer islands, and we kind of negotiated with one of the First Nations groups on the island to allow us to camp there. So we're paying them to let us to camp. They said no, you can't camp on the island. I said we'll pay you. They said okay. So that's about my negotiating skills right there. So and then we're gonna kayak fish, and so. I'm really excited about that. I did bring a fishing kayak up there, probably in 2013, and carried it out in one of the skiffs. Jumped in the kayak, fished for a bit while everyone else was fishing, and I just told the other boats because I was by myself. I didn't have a dry suit, all this kind of stuff, and I said, hey, just kind of keep an eye on me because we're like in the Pacific. We're like out, and I'm like, just kind of don't take off. And like 10 minutes later, I'm like stripping the line. I look up, and I cannot see a single one of our boats at all. They're like nowhere to be found. I'm like, I'm not comfortable with this. I don't have a radio. I don't have a dry suit. Like, I shouldn't be here right now. So it was like a learning experience. So I'm excited about going back and having other people along that are in kayaks, so they can't ditch me in the middle of the Pacific. So the resort. Honestly, the resort in the past hasn't been that great. We were there for the fishing, and it got a couple of years ago. It got to the point where I got kind of concerned about some of the condition of the boats, with safety equipment on the boats, radios not being reliable and stuff like that. And so we pulled the plug on the Tofino trip after hosting trips up there for years. And the place got bought out by three new owners. They invested something like $17 million into renovations, and they've redone everything. I mean, the rooms have been gutted and redone. The boats all have like new electronics on them. They've remodeled the whole marina. They've redone the restaurants. The guy that won Top Chef Canada. I don't know if you've ever seen that TV show, but they hired that guy to be like the chef at the restaurants. Like, the food's out of this world. So it's had a total overhaul, and so when I had reached out to their fishing manager, he was telling me about some of the changes, and this was like 2 summers ago, and I'm like, okay, well, yeah, I was a little doubtful. I'm like, I don't know how much they could have changed all that stuff up, but so I went up this summer, And we just did a small trip, kind of under the radar. Didn't really tell people about it. Had a couple customers go, and then I took my family, took my wife and 2 kids, and so we got to go up and fish. And we just fished for 2 days, and just to try to see how it was. And I was really impressed with all the stuff. So we're jumping back into stuff up there, 2020. Super excited about it. So on the center console boats, we're fishing a lot around different rips around these different islands, and there's kind of 2 ways that you fish out of the boat. You'll either troll a fly, which is a really effective way to just cover water and hook just a ton of fish, or you can cast flies. And so if we're trolling, a lot of times we'll fish a bucktail fly. I'll hold this up here. Can you see that on the screen for people? Look at that. So it's important if you're a fly tyer, it's important when you tie these type of flies that aren't weighted, to leave that front hook in place. Because if you cut that front hook, then there's no keel to the fly, and the fly can spin on you and stuff like that. So you want to have a hook that's heavy enough to keel it. So we take this, we put a small little spinner on the line with a couple beads. So the spinner isn't right up on the hook, keeps it just out here. And this is that's the Canadian way to do it. Pulling a bucktail with a little tiny spinner on it. You can even pick it up and cast it if you have to. I've spent so many hours dragging flies and just burning holes in the ocean out in Tofino. We've experimented with every color. We've experimented with having a spinner and not having a spinner. And I can tell you, it doesn't matter what color. If there's the spinner on it, that fly always gets bit first. If you both have the spinner and you want to have the most consistent fishing, the pink fly's always gonna get bit. I mean, chartreuse definitely works. There's a bunch of different colors that work. This particular color, like if you look at like the old Bruce Ferguson, Les Johnson Fly Fishing for Pacific Salmon book that was out 4 days ago, they had bucktails in there, and there was one in there called the Tofino Special, and it was pink over orange over white. It's a color combination that doesn't only work in Tofino; it works really well in Puget Sound as well. So that's a pretty simple tie of that one. If you are going to cast, you can tie the same fly, and here's one where we actually cut off the front hook, and so it's strung out, same colors, pink over orange over white. I tie mine a little bit different than this. I like to have some fun goofing off with them. But this is a great fly for casting, and on these boats, if you have 2 people on the boat, it's really easy to have one person up front, one person in the back, and you don't even have to make a long cast, but especially if fish are around the kelp beds, casting at the kelp beds, looking for bait. So, but if you are, I got stuck on a boat with these little monsters for 4 days. So, I have videos. I wonder why the video's not playing. Maybe it'll play. So anyways, here's, so it looks pretty foggy in the morning because you just get this marine layer, and so it can be a little bit chilly out on the water if you're not prepared for that marine layer running out. Like especially in August, the fog can be quite thick. The boats have, not only do they have fish finders on them, but they have GPS navigation as well. So it's great to be able to follow the line to see where to go, because with all these different island sets, it can get turned around and lost pretty quickly. This video is working. Look how many times this fish jumps. I mean, you should just count the jumps. It's crazy. But there's a lot of these fish returning back to the island, but some of these fish are also moving down the coast, and they're gonna split off and go down around the south part of the island, or they're gonna continue on into Washington. So this last summer, we were supposed to have a really strong coho run here in Washington State, and it didn't happen. There was no fish. What ended up happening was, I had some biologists from WFW show me a really cool presentation on some of the different ways that they're evaluating ocean conditions. And so many of you have heard of the blob. So this warm water, like this really warm water, giant area of water that got pushed up against kind kind of the west coast in our area that is not very nutrient rich, and the fish have a difficult time surviving in that because there's just no bait for them. There's no feed. And so off the mouth of the Columbia this last summer, there was coho early, like in June, and people were just crushing coho super early, and everyone's like, wow, this is going to be a great coho year because early signs were really good out in the ocean. The blob had gone away, and then what ended up happening was the blob actually came back late summer. Those fish that were at the Columbia, at the mouth of the Columbia, they were there because there was no food out in the ocean for them, and so the fish were eating off of the Columbia plume that has lots of nutrients and lots of bait fish and all that kind of stuff. And the fish that were up, when the blob reappeared up in the Gulf of Alaska, etc., when they came back, they had to get through a desert to get back to Washington, and so they died. I mean, they just didn't survive. The ones that survived were like really short. So this area is really rich, and so for fish that are coming back, this is one of the spots where they like to kind of come into and feed on. And there's just like, I mean, we would be cruising around. I wish I got video of just like the fish finder to show on here, because like there'd be times where you're like, I have no idea how deep it is here, because the fish finder does not read anything, and the whole screen's red because there's just bait. And you look over the side of the boat, and it's just like flashing everywhere, and there's just bait everywhere, and then you're really quickly woken up because both lines are zipping out, and fish are jumping and going crazy. And I mean, it was fun. So for us, like we just bucktailed, we just trolled flies because there was 4 of us in the boat. My kids, they're 8 and they're in 10. They're not they can't cast 8 weights. I mean, with a trout rod, they're starting to get dangerous, but with the 8 weight, it's not really going to happen. So we just trolled and let them reel in the fish. We cracked off quite a few of them, and I mean, it was super fun. But you can just check out like the little islands up there, like just really cool protected waters. So if you go outside a little bit more, it's more, we're from right where we're at here, we're a half a mile from the last island, and then it's Pacific Ocean. Like there it is. So, and if you go south of this little spot, there's a big surf break, and there's a ton of surfers, and it's like a really popular spot. So you'll get a swell out here, especially in the afternoon if it's windy. But where we're at right here, it's a little bit more calm. But I mean, there's not a Washington 2019 coho. I mean, pretty decent little fish. So, but yeah, my kids just had a blast, just reeling. And we probably hooked 20 coho each morning. It was really good fishing. I mean, fishing's not always that good up here. I remember one year we had, so 5 boats on the water. This was probably 2013, and we hooked, between 5 boats, we hooked 60 to 80 coho per boat. I actually took a picture, and there was like 3 boats passing each other, and every single boat had a fish on or was netting a fish. It's one of my favorite photos. You can't really tell what's going on in the picture because the boats are kind of far away. You zoom in, and you're like, no way, that's ridiculous. The next day, we hooked 5 fish for the entire fleet. So that's just the nature of migratory fish, right? They're coming through, and like sometimes like there's fish and they hang out, and it's great. Sometimes a whole tidal wave of fish hits the area, and then other times it's like it's like ghost town, no fish around. So here's a little fun video of Kaden just slugging it out with. So he's using a Sage 8 weight, and just like it's a nice fish. Like he's been slugging it out for a while.
We still haven't got it in like 20 minutes.
20 minutes, it's probably more like 3. But it feels like 20, right? Like for all of us that have caught nice fish.
Do you have to worry about seals very often?
You know what? We had one fish that we think might have gotten grabbed by a seal, or it was either a king. But it dumped line, and my daughter slugged it out with this thing. We never saw it. So, but
generally no.
But generally not so much. There it goes.
Yeah.
So my kids did a great job. I think this is a great trip for, man, if you have like a high school age kid or a college kid or something like that, and like they're kind of into the fishing thing, they're into the fly fishing thing, but they haven't like gotten addicted like all of us. This is the thing that can just.
This might be a record one, Kaden.
The big one.
Kaden, where's your mic?
Okay, so there's the fish. Nice, I mean, just solid fish. So there are some like seals and stuff that hang out over on this spot, but I mean, we would just kind of cruise along this little spot and just every pass just get blown up by fish. It was super fun. So, and it was on pink fly. Pink fly is the thing. The other thing that's really cool about this is that when the fishing is a little bit slow for salmon, there are a ton of rockfish up there. Like they are everywhere. You can just like put the boat in a little bit of a lower gear, a little bit slower, so the flies sink a little bit, and you're just like right by the kelp beds, and boom, rockfish. I mean, you if you wanted to catch 100 rockfish a day, on the fly you could. The fun thing is to throw a clouser and have your buddy ready with a popper, and with the single line and clouser, and when he hooks a fish, like so kind of keep trying to fish slowly, kind of start reeling it up, and then throw the popper out there because. That one fish gets the rest of his buddies all excited, and you can throw the popper out there, and then you can just have like really fun popper action. And we've gotten some rockfish that are like 7 pounds, like just. I mean they're really big. So I mean the smaller ones like this, I mean that's still a nice fish, but it's not gonna fight like a coho or like a 7-pound rockfish for sure. So. So that's out there's the swell area. There's a really fun wash rock out there, and it goes from 60 feet deep and comes all the way up, and the water just like rolls over it, and it's like, I mean the rock's not big, it's 20 feet. I remember in like, gosh, when was it? 2011 we were there, and I'm fishing with 2 guys on the boat, and all of a sudden, like we all got hit with like the most foul smelling. Putrid smell like we've ever it was horrible. It was disgusting, and like we were almost puking over the side of the boat. We had no idea what we're like if that came from any of you, we need to take you to the hospital. Like it was so bad. It was, and then like a minute goes by, and all of a sudden the same thing happens again, and we're like, and then one of the guys like, I know that smell. That's whale breath.
Oh.
Like, what? There's no whales around here. There's just this wash rock. And then all of a sudden we notice that there, on the other side of this wash rock, there's a whale just leaning up against it, just like hanging out.
Oh.
Like, I don't know if he's sleeping or just what, but then all of a sudden, like, we see like this, we're like, okay, don't breathe. Don't breathe. It was like right there, right next to us, we didn't even notice it. That swell area, you can just do circles around that wash rock and just hook fish after fish after fish. It's pretty ridiculous. So we went out there. My daughter got sick. She started puking up over the side of the boat. I kept telling her to look up, and she wouldn't. And so she got a little seasick. There's a big box of fish. So I had to grab the rod when it went off, and this thing was a battle. It was on a 7-weight. It ended up being 14 pounds. Had a little scale too. And scales are a curse, right? Like you're like, man, this thing's like 15-pound steelhead, and which 15-pound hatchery steelhead don't exist in Washington. Really, like you put it on the scale, it's like 12 pounds. You're like, shoot. So, or like every 20-pound king, that's actually like 17. So this thing was actually 14 pounds. It was pretty remarkable. And every single year I've been up there, every single trip. I've always hooked a king fishing for coho. And I don't really target the kings that much. Like, you're not, where we're at, you can't keep any kings, you're not supposed to target them. But there's just so many of them that, I mean, like this on this last trip, I got this king. That was a super fun fish on the 7-weight. There's just, that stuff happens down here in Washington, but it just happens up there at a frequency that is, it's just crazy that, it's not like a once in a lifetime occurrence. It's like every year on the trip, something crazy happens every single time. Like we had a couple of guys that, one of them like wasn't paying attention to his line as it was sinking. He was helping the other guy. I think they had netted a coho or something like that. Goes back to his rod, starts stripping the line in, and hooks a fish. He's like, "Oh my gosh, I hooked a fish." Ended up being a 20-pound halibut. Like, of course, it's Tofino. Of course that happens. So after we picked on salmon for a while, in the mornings, there was a nice slack tide in the afternoon, and so we brought along a couple of gear rods and got a couple lingcod. I don't know. Each day we probably hooked 8 to 10 lingcod. I'm guessing in a couple hours. A couple of them were keepers. One of them. So I'm using this this thing from what is it called? A Lancer jig. And it's like a 7-ounce Lancer jig. These things are great. And I had a lingcod that had, it was a nice keeper size one. Had bit the thing, but it was behind the hook. It was just grabbing the back of the tail. And I'm bringing it up, and I see that the thing is holding on to the back of the tail. And so I'm like, Kaden, grab the net. And like the net that we have on this boat, I don't know if you saw those other pictures. They're like, they're not really for those boats. Like these. I mean, you could like reach down over this. These things probably you could use like fishing off of a pier. Like the handle's like way too long, right? So he can hardly hold this net up. He just like dips it in the water, and I get the fish up and I'm trying to lead it into the net, and it like as soon as it gets close to the surface, it like spits the lure, just like lets go. And I'm like lift up, and the thing swims in the net as he lifts up. And it was amazing. He was so proud of it. He was walking around the dock like holding this lure, and like just walking up to strangers going, "Guess what? This lingcod like had the back of this." I mean, he was like telling everyone the story because he felt like a hero because of that. So, but you can keep lingcod if they're over I think 27 inches or so, something like that. So, it's a nice sized fish. But I've tried catching them with flies and. It's possible you can get, there's a couple spots that I have where you can get a lot of them that are smaller. It's hard to get some bigger ones on the fly. But what I've found is that with trying to fly fish for lingcod, it's really hard to fish your fly effectively more than 60 feet deep. And so people are like, 60 feet? You're getting your fly down 60 feet? So it's possible. There's a line from Airflow that I really like. That's a cold water big game line, and it sinks at 11.1 inches a second. The flies that I would tie for these have like white bunny strips, because I was really hoping to get a halibut on it too. So white bunny strips, and it's got a big 4/0 stinger on the back with a 4/0 hook up front, just like white rabbit strip hanging off of it. And then I put the extra large lead eyes on the shank, with a stack of galvanized washers, and then another extra large lead eye. So it's not easy to cast, but you're not going to fight a good sized lingcod on anything less than a 10 weight. You probably want a 12. I bring a 15, so I bring like blue water gear for them, and crank the drag down really hard and just like pull on them like you're pulling on a sailfish or a tuna or something like that. But that I can fish it about 60 feet deep, and it's fairly effective. But deeper than that, you just end up with too much line sag, too much drift, and then you start like snagging the bottom, start breaking fly lines, and all sorts of stuff that's bad. So I don't remember this one. It's just a picture. Oh, so then the restaurant has like this incredible food, right? So I was talking about this food. So they'll cook up, they'll like do like a cook your catch thing, and like in a cast iron like pizza pan. Like it's incredible food. So super excited about it. Here's some fun pictures from years past. So this is one of our guests, Pat. He's been on a bunch of trips with me. I think he he's thinking about maybe going this summer. Pat, if you're watching this, I hope you go. I hope you go with me. We had so much fun. But this is a cabezon. So if you've ever hooked a cabezon, those things are crazy. I got a pretty gnarly picture of another one in a bit. Here's a couple lingcod that we got, keeper lingcod that were on the fly, like double hookup. I mean, pretty crazy stuff. Another lingcod. Here's a small one that we threw back, but it just had a crazy mouth to it. This is the first king that I ever got in Tofino. Okay, so here's a fish story. So this was like one of the first trips. I mean, I have no gray hair there. So it was a while ago. So I was using, I was with a Canadian guy on the boat. He hands me a mooching rod, and he's like, hey, let's try to get a king. I'm like, okay. So there's a Point Wilson dart on it, which those are great for jigging for kings. So I lower the line down to the bottom, and this rod has so much bend in it that I don't think the jig's really even moving that much. So I'm trying to jig with this thing, and all of a sudden I snag the bottom, and I'm like, oh. So I'm snagged up on the bottom. We're pulling on it. We're driving the boat in a circle, like trying to get it 60 feet deep, trying to get this thing off the bottom. And he's like, dude, that's my last one, and they're like $10. Like, we can't lose that thing. I'm like, I'll give you the $10. Like, I'm sorry. So he really wants to get it back. So I'm like, I don't want to lose his stuff. So we're driving in circles, trying to get this thing, pulling on it. We can't get it free at all. And like, we really tried. And then like somehow it just comes unhooked. And so I start reeling it up, and all of a sudden, wham! I get hit by a fish. And then the line just starts screaming, and I'm like, I got a fish on you. And he doesn't believe me until he sees like the line just peeling. That's the fish. Wow. So this like 20-pound king hits this thing as I'm reeling it up. And I'm like, what are the chances of that? Only in Tofino. Only in Tofino that kind of stuff happens. Meaning, there's a nice king. So this fish, there's a big lingcod caught on an 8-weight, and there's this really cool rock grouping that it's really close to where we're going to actually do the kayak camping trip, but we can fish it out of these boats no problem. And on the front side of these rocks, it can get a little bit sloppy if there's a swell and tide's moving, but if it's calm, it's great. But what ends up happening is that the bait just gets slammed up against these little rock islands, and it's like 70, 80 feet deep, and then just jumps up, just sheer rock, and the bait will just get stacked in there. So Leonard and Leonard's going this next year, which I'm stoked on. He's been a couple times. So we go in front of one of these little rock islands, and we have a double hookup on coho. We got 2 coho on. It's awesome. We let the fish go. Next little rock island, we're going in front of it. I get a coho, and we have another double hookup. I have a coho, he has a king. And the thing we slug it out, and then we end up losing the fish. And then there's one last little rock island, and we're going in front of it. Another double hookup, and I get a coho on, and his line's just peeling for the bottom. And he's slugging it out and fighting this thing, and I'm standing there just waiting for the net. I'm like, man, that's crazy. Like, at least you're getting your revenge on the king that we lost, you know? And then we see brown as it's coming up. I'm like, it's not a king. What? I have no idea what this is. You know, there's, usually lingcod are down on the bottom, around structure, stuff like that. This thing was in like just open water feeding on bait fish, and the fly was 3 inches deep. We were just trolling the fly. The thing ate it on the surface. And so we netted this thing and ended up being 18 pounds, like just beautiful lingcod. It was awesome. It was, and then it was like one of those things. It's like a once in a lifetime type thing. Except when you're in Tofino, it's like that's the story for the trip. So there's a king just caught bucktailing, just like trolling a fly and hooked that. Here's a nice big king that Rob got. This one he wanted to cast. He was kind of bored from trolling, and so he threw his line in the water, started stripping line off the reel, and then saw the line twitch. So then he started stripping and then came tight to it, and then 45 minutes later that was in the net. I mean, and he was on I think it was a 7-weight or something like that. I mean, it was a long battle. So, and the funny thing was I kept mocking him, like, because I thought it was a coho, and I thought he was just not pulling hard enough, you know. And a lot of times anglers just don't like fight, they're afraid to break a fish off or whatever, so they don't like pull on the fish. And so I'm like, come on, Rob, pull on that thing. Like, let's get going. I want to get a picture again. I didn't realize that like he was tied into this monster. So like one of my Canadian buddies with a nice coho. That was the day where we hooked a lot of fish. There's another one. There's a halibut that we got. So we got this halibut in this one little spot off this island called London. We're online. I'm not gonna really talk about the little spot that I know. So there's a spot close to that island. It's a huge island, but there's a spot, and it's legit. So we got the halibut there that day. I went back the next day. I'm like, man, I wonder if there's any more halibut. Hooked a 25-pound king. Like every time we go to the spot, there's always something there. It's very cool. Okay, so I was talking about cabezon and how they're pretty wild fish. So it's in the sculpin family, and they're like really big sculpin. They can get 15 pounds. I mean, they can get really big. They taste like a lingcod. The meat will be like blue and then turn white, kind of like how sometimes some lingcod are. But the thing that's crazy about these guys, okay, so here's the gross picture for people that don't like guts and stuff. It eats crabs.
Oh.
They eat crabs. So look at this is out of its stomach, like full size crabs. So pretty wild fish. So here's a couple pictures from like my second ever Tofino trip that was really awesome. Fishing with these guys on the boat. We had a hookup where we had a triple hookup where we had 2 coho on and then hooked a king while we were fighting the coho, and it was a really big king and ended up losing it, but I don't have a picture of that. But yeah, but I think this last summer with my kids, we probably had each day between 6 and 8 double hookups. So the fish were just so much on the bait that you get to a spot where the bait was, and both lines are going. I'm sure if you had more lines out, that would create a mess. But it was just, they were just there. So it was super fun. So, and there's all sorts of different species of rockfish. So not only like black rockfish, but coppers, China. There's I don't know. There's probably 7 or 8 different, maybe more than 8 different species I've seen. Pretty fun. And then, the cool thing about them too is that, there is a concern about rockfish conservation when you're hooking them in deep water, because of their swim bladder. You bring them up and their eyes are bugging out, or their stomach's coming out of their mouth, and you should use a descender tool to send them back down and release them at depth so that they have a better chance of survival. But up here, there's so many rockfish in shallow water that they eat the fly off the surface. So you're not bringing fish up from depth, and so you don't have to worry about their survival on that kind of stuff. So that's just a really fun fish to just throw flies at, and they live there. They're resident fish. So sometimes salmon, you don't know what the year is going to be like, or even the week is going to be like because of just the migratory patterns. But these guys are always there, and it's a lot of fun to target them. So okay, how do you get to Tofino? From Gig Harbor, I go up to Port Angeles, take the ferry across, and Port Angeles to Victoria. Then from Victoria, you drive 4 hours up the island and then to the west coast through Port Alberni, and so it's an all-day trip to get there. It's 8 hours of travel, but it's broken up because that's 8 hours including waiting for the ferry, an hour-and-a-half ferry ride. So it doesn't feel like you're just slugging it out behind the wheel that whole time. So it's a comfortable drive, and then the last several hours. Phone down. Last few hours, it's really scenic and it's beautiful. Sometimes it gets, depending on when you go, it's frustrating because sometimes there's 20 RVs in front of you. And you're like, just get off the highway. But so it's easy to get over to Tofino. The meals aren't provided with the package deal that we do. now that we actually eat, this last trip, we didn't want to go anywhere else because the food was so good right there at the resort. But usually for breakfast, like it's, you bring your own, something simple. Most of the restaurants in town aren't open for breakfast. They open, it's a surf town, they open a little bit later. It's a little bit more laid back. And then lunch is on the boat, so you just bring a little cooler, bring your own lunch with you. And then in the past, we've walked to different restaurants. There's a lot of great restaurants really close by, but I might not be walking anywhere because their food was really good. So great prawn tacos, great pizza, all sorts of stuff. So so how it works is on the boats there's we have about a half dozen skiffs, and so I'll be on one of the boats. And then sometimes we'll have someone from the resort that's on a Grady White, and like I just kind of shepherd the whole group out. So you're operating the boat and you're fishing, and it's like you and a buddy or you and two buddies or whatever. You're netting the fish. You got to tie your flies on, all that stuff. But I'm also like right there. We're fishing as kind of a pack, a fleet. There's very few other boats out there. There's some sport fishing boats that are, there's like guide charter boats that are out there, but most of those are out fishing for kings, for halibut, and they go out into the big water. They're not usually fishing the inshore stuff as much, and so sometimes we don't see any other boats. Usually we see like a boat or two or three boats. Like it's not, and that's for a pretty large area. It's pretty so you're only 20 minutes from town, but it feels like you're in the middle of nowhere just because there's, it's not like Puget Sound where everywhere you look you can see a boat at any one point, right? Especially when the salmon are in. So it's, and that might be why those kings are so aggressive when the coho are around and will eat flies like right under the surface because they're not getting hammered on by anglers. So it's, it's pretty aggressive fishing at times. So. Okay, so I haven't taken a breath. Questions? What do you guys? What questions do you have about Tofino?
Do you take fish back with you?
Yeah, so there is a fish processing facility right next to the dock, and so they will take the fish, they will portion size it, vacuum seal it, flash freeze it, and then the last day when you're leaving, you just go pick up the fish, take off, and it's pretty quick and easy to do, and then I think you just pay per pound, so.
Yeah. Are all the roads paved to get there?
Yeah, the roads are all paved to get there. That peninsula that Tofino's on sees 1 million visitors every year, so even though it's not like a multi-lane highway, it gets a lot of traffic, and so it's a sometimes trying to find lodging in Tofino, or accommodations. I mean, it can be impossible, in the summertime. So.
Rods, reels, everything like that provided, or bring your own?
You gotta bring your own gear, and I recommend an 8-weight. So the Rio Outbound Short. This is the line that I use in the Type 6 sinking. So it's got 30 feet of Type 6, the Sink 6. The Rio Striper 300 line is a good line as well. Airflow makes a depth finder line, 300 grain. That's nice on an 8-weight. That in intermediate lines, not really necessary. For casting, if you like casting intermediate line, it'd be great. But the sinking line I like because sometimes those fish are holding down a little bit deeper, and you don't have to worry about stripping the fly too fast because they will just hammer it. So, that's the line I like. I love a bag like a gear bag like this that you can bring on the boat. I bring like a dry box that just has like gear in it too. So there's not a ton of storage on the boat. So there's like a front platform you can kind of store some stuff underneath it. So a bag like that with your tackle in it. Is great to kind of keep things organized, and when you start getting like double hookups and one guy has to remember to drive the boat, right? remember there's like kelp beds and rocks. So, I mean, it's totally safe. You should all go on this trip. So, but, you know, you have to like you gotta drive the boat while you have like, you know, 2 fish on and all that kind of stuff. So having a clean working area in the back of the boat is really nice. So for our kayak trip, like one of the things that we're doing is that we're actually requiring everyone wears a dry suit, just for safety. I mean, if it's warm out enough that we don't need it, that's great. But we're requiring that people have that. If they don't have a kayak, we also rent a Hobie Outback for the trip, and it comes with a rental dry suit, Coca-Cola dry suit. But definitely a trip for people that have some kayak fishing experience. Just because, you know, the conditions, it can get a little bit choppy out there. It's coastal. It's not the place for your first kayak fishing adventure. That should be on the lake, and then Puget Sound, and then yeah, maybe Tofino.
So when are you planning the kayak trip?
Yeah.
You
The
know,
kayak trip
general-
is the 10th to the 14th. So
Oh.
so the day that the first group on the boats leaves, the second group shows up for the kayaking trip, and so we'll go out on that Monday, and we will we'll get to the island. We'll fish that evening. The evening fishing can be really, really good for coho, like great, and it can be calm too. Flat water can be really nice. Those days I picked because the tide is very gentle, so that I mean, we'll see how that affects the salmon fishing. It will be great being in kayaks, not having to worry about current and swell as much. It'll be great for fishing rockfish and all that stuff. I actually just bought like a couple harpoon setups and big polyballs, and like we're gonna go see if we can get out and go try to get some halibut in the kayaks. Which you know, when I talk to people that aren't kayak anglers and have been exposed to that, they're like, "What do you mean you're gonna go try to get 100-pound halibut in a kayak? That sounds insane." Well, yes, it is insane, and it's gonna be awesome. So, it'll be fun. So then we'll fish all day Monday night, Tuesday, Wednesday, most of Thursday, and then we'll get picked up Thursday, hopefully late in the day. Go back into town, grab a shower at the resort. We'll have rooms at the resort. Grab a great dinner, and then Friday wake up nice and rested for the drive back home. So I'm working out with the resort to have, either we will have a chase boat or have them come out every day with a boat just to meet up with us, to be able to check on us, bring out ice, take fish to the processor. If we get a halibut and we want to bring a halibut home, like sweet, like take it back to Trilogy Fish Processing. So working through just some different logistics for that stuff. But
What are the campsites like?
no, there's no campsite.
I mean, I guess that's what I'm getting at, though.
Yeah,
so.
it's a sandy beach on an island.
Awesome.
There's
You're looking at
wolves and bears on the island, and but we're gonna have I imagine having a generator with party lights, and we're gonna do it right. We're gonna it'll be a little more glamping than just roughing it. So, but yeah, each angler will be responsible for their own fishing tackle, a tent, sleeping bag, stuff like that. Kind of communal things. I'm gonna make sure that we're all dialed in on for like the kitchen.
License, Canadian.
Fishing licenses are pretty easy to get online on their website, and there's a limit of 2 coho a day. So you're asking about keeping fish.
Oh yeah.
You can keep two coho a day. I think it's 3 rockfish a day. I think it's 3 lingcod a day, and 1 halibut. And then there's a possession limit of 2 fishing days worth. So all those numbers doubled. But I just think it's fun to keep some fish. There's some really healthy fish populations up there. I mean, when you see how big the rockfish are and how many of them there are, you're like, yeah, I could keep 2 rockfish right now. That's not a problem. But it's like, I think it's like with everything. How much is realistic that you can eat in a reasonable amount of time? I mean, if it's gonna last you all the way until next April, well, you might want to make sure you keep enough that is gone in 3 months, and then you're buying fresher fish in April at the store or something. I don't know. I mean, I mean, I love to eat fish and love to keep fish, but you know, I think about like what's sustainable, what's the best practices and stuff like that. So.
So is it gonna be like camp and cook some of the fish too?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Crab pots. We're gonna bring. We'll bring crab pots. We'll bring a shrimp pot. Like we're gonna bring some stuff along to you know, live off the land a little bit. So I mean, and if we don't catch any fish, we'll just shoot a wolf. I'm just kidding. We can't have guns, so we'll have to harpoon it.
Oh my god.
So,
Fish bags?
what?
You want fish bags for kayaks?
Yeah, like insulated fish bags.
Yeah.
We'll have those. So and they have an ice machine there at the resort that you know they have like the kind of that shaved salted ice that's like great, and they use it for like tuna trips and stuff. So you know, I mean even if the seas are flat, we probably won't go out for tuna in the kayak. So, but.
Casting a 14 weight from the kayak sounds
Yeah.
miserable.
Yeah, it's got troll for him really fast. Just pedal along. So, but yeah, I'm excited about kind of kicking back off Tofino trips and developing our kayak fishing stuff too. You know, if you're a little bit nervous about the kayak thing, you know, I definitely would recommend jumping in on the boat trip first. And then if you're like, man, I want to come back and do this from the kayaks the following year, then definitely, you know. So
Same price for both.
no, it's $15.99 for the boat trip, and that includes the lodging at the resort. The camping trip's $5.99, assuming you have your own dry suit and kayak, and that includes breakfasts and dinners. And then you're on your own for lunches. I think that's what it includes. It definitely includes dinner. So yeah, we're still trying to figure out some of that stuff. But that, I mean, hiring a landing craft is not cheap, and paying off the First Nations loans camp on the island that is a little bit too. So, but yeah, so there's we have some fixed expenses on that one, but and then it's $500 to rent an Outback and a dry suit, and
Do you take those up there, Blake? If you're renting?
yes,
Uh-huh.
yeah,
You
so if
transfer.
you're renting one of ours. I'm pulling a trailer that can carry 6, and so I have a second trailer that can carry 6, but we'll probably have to leave it here for our guides that will still be here guiding. So,
What's the size of the groups for both trips, approximately?
so I think that our group size is it's either 5 or 6 boats for that first part, and then for the second part. We're gonna have a group size of about 9 to 12 kayak anglers, and then we'll split into smaller fishing groups, because just for safety, you know, I don't wanna have to look out and count 12 kayaks, you know, but if we're fishing in fishing groups of 3, that way everyone knows where everyone's at, and we can kind of divide up and, you know, all that kind of stuff. I'll have radios and, you know, so we're, all that kind of jazz, so.
You're requiring dry suits. Are you requiring radios as well?
For the kayaks?
Yeah.
I think we'll probably require radios for each fishing group.
Okay.
But not for every. I don't know if we need it for every angler. But definitely for every fishing group. And I know some guys already have them, and so we'll just encourage them to bring them. So you know, I'm just thinking about like the minimums. Yeah, I mean, we want to have at least 4 radios. I have 3, so you know, that makes it pretty easy right there. But on the boats, you know, so boats, a lot of times I'll just wear sandals, but my feet don't get cold because I'm barefoot all summer long, so I'm kind of used to that. But Crocs are great boat shoes, or you want something that's just comfortable to be in. You're standing on your feet a lot. So having a rain pant is good in case it's going to be, you know, it's misty and a little bit wet in the morning just from that marine layer. So having a rain pant, or I mean, we have had rain up there a little bit, so having that kind of gear is good. So, okay, I'm gonna be starting a live stream at 2 o'clock for our Montana trip, and so I'll answer more questions for you guys here, but I'm gonna say bye to the online folk, and